A young nurse does something unusual to become the heir of a millionaire philanthropist after discovering compromising documents about him. What she did with it shocked everyone. The grand ballroom of the Waldorf Astoria was alive with the glitter of chandeliers and the murmur of the city's elite gathered for the annual Heart of Gold Gala. Harold Fincher, aged 72, stood at the edge of the dance floor, his silver hair immaculate, his tuxedo a perfect fit. With a glass of champagne in hand, he surveyed the room with a practiced eye, acknowledging nods and smiles with a genteel nod of his own. At the center of the room was a large banner that read, "Supporting Youth in Medicine," the cause Harold had passionately championed for years. Waiters in crisp uniforms weaved through the crowd, offering hors d'oeuvres and refilling glasses, while a string quartet played softly in the background. Harold's gaze lingered on a young woman talking animatedly with a group of well-dressed attendees. Jane Dawson, 29, a nurse from the local community clinic, was not typical of the gala's usual demographic. Her dress, elegant yet modest, hinted at her unassuming nature. She laughed, her eyes lighting up in a way that drew people in. Seeing her genuine enthusiasm, Harold felt a tug at his heartstrings. She represented the very essence of why he donated, real people making a real difference. As he approached, Jane turned to greet him, her face lighting up with recognition and respect. "Mr. Fincher," she said, extending her hand, "it's an honor to meet you in person, finally. Thank you for supporting our clinic." Harold took her hand, his smile genuine. "Please, call me Harold. And the honor is mine, Jane. It's young professionals like you who inspire me. Tell me more about your work." As Jane spoke about the clinic's challenges and triumphs, Harold listened intently. She didn't just talk about her role. She spoke of her patients with a warmth and dedication that went beyond mere duty. Harold found himself nodding along, her passion resonating with his own memories of starting out in the world of philanthropy. Later in the evening, as the final notes of the string quartet faded into polite applause, Harold ascended the small stage, set up at one end of the ballroom. The room quieted as he adjusted the microphone, his presence commanding attention. "Ladies and gentlemen," Harold began, his voice steady and clear, "tonight we celebrate not only what we have achieved, but also what we aspire to accomplish. Each year, we come together to support a cause close to my heart, providing opportunities for young people in medicine." He paused, looking over the crowd, his eyes finally resting on Jane, who watched him from her table with a mixture of admiration and curiosity. "This year," Harold continued, "I've been particularly inspired by one remarkable individual, a young nurse whose dedication to her patients exemplifies the spirit of our mission." The spotlight subtly shifted, illuminating Jane, who looked around in surprise. "Jane Dawson," Harold announced, "has shown exceptional commitment and care in her work. It is for this reason, and to ensure the continuation of such dedication, that I have decided to make a significant change to my will. I intend to leave a substantial part of my estate to support her and others like her in their endeavors." The announcement sent a ripple through the crowd. Whispers filled the air as people turned to look at Jane, whose face registered shock and bewilderment. Harold's family, seated at a table near the front, looked at each other in disbelief and growing concern. Harold stepped down from the stage, his heart pounding with a mixture of relief and anticipation. He had set the wheels in motion, fully aware of the controversy his decision would stir. As he made his way back to his table, he watched Jane surrounded by a mix of congratulators and curious onlookers. He knew he had altered the course of her life, but he firmly believed it was for the best. The impact of Harold's announcement echoed far beyond the ballroom walls, stirring a storm within his own family. Later that evening, in the quiet of Harold's expansive study, his children gathered around the mahogany desk where their father sat. The air was thick with tension. James, the eldest at 45 and always the most pragmatic, was the first to speak. "Dad, what were you thinking?" His tone was a mix of disbelief and irritation. "Leaving such a substantial part of your estate to a nurse you barely know. This could look like senility or undue influence. It's reckless." Harold's daughter, Evelyn, who always had a softer approach, added, "It's not just about the money, Dad. It's about the family legacy. What will people say? It's embarrassing." Her concern was palpable, her eyes searching her father's for an explanation. Harold listened quietly, his expression unreadable. "I've made my decision," he finally said, his voice firm yet calm. "Jane's work embodies the principles I've spent a lifetime supporting. This isn't a whim, it's a considered decision to ensure the future of our philanthropic endeavors. But to leave her such a significant portion—" James tried to argue back, but Harold raised his hand to stop him. "I am not dismissing your inheritances, but I am reallocating some assets. It's done," Harold stated, a note of finality in his voice. His youngest son, Michael, who had been silent up until now, spoke up, his voice laced with suspicion. "Has she done something to manipulate you? This is unlike you." Harold's gaze was steely as he addressed Michael's insinuation. "Jane has done nothing but dedicate herself to a cause we all claim to support. My decision is based on merit and foresight, not manipulation." The siblings exchanged looks, their dissatisfaction clear, but Harold's decision was final. They left the study with a mixture of frustration and concern, each lost in thought about the implications of their father's unexpected generosity. The next morning, the news of Harold Finch's radical change to his will had spread like wildfire through social media and the press. "Wealthy philanthropist leaves fortune to young nurse," headlines screamed, each article spinning the story with more sensationalism than the last. Jane, caught unprepared, found herself thrust into a harsh spotlight. Photographers and reporters camped outside the community clinic where she worked, eager to capture any moment of the new heiress in the making. The attention was overwhelming, and with it came the harsh scrutiny of the public. At the clinic, Jane tried to focus on her work, comforting a young patient even as a reporter's flash went off outside the window. Her colleague, Lisa, closed the blinds with a sigh. "It's a circus out there," she murmured. "Are you okay?" Jane shook her head, her smile strained. "I didn't sign up for this. I just wanted to help people, not become a media spectacle." The news also fueled discussions on various talk shows, where pundits debated Harold's mental state, Jane's character, and the ethics of such an inheritance. Social media was divided, with hashtags like Judge Gold Digger Nurse and True Philanthropy trending simultaneously. Amid this turmoil, an op-ed appeared in a major newspaper, penned by a respected journalist. It suggested that Harold's decision might be a sign of a deeper strategy or philosophy, urging the public to consider his history of thoughtful philanthropy before passing judgment. Despite this, the narrative was hard to control, and the Fincher family watched with increasing anxiety as Harold's legacy and their family name became subjects of public debate. The media storm showed no signs of abating, and Jane found herself longing for the simplicity and anonymity of her life just days before. In the days following the media frenzy, Harold invited Jane to his private estate, a sprawling property overlooking the Hudson River. The atmosphere was a stark contrast to the chaotic world outside. The gardens were tranquil, and the home was filled with the quiet hum of history and luxury. As they walked through the manicured gardens, Harold looked at Jane, who seemed overwhelmed by the serenity and the burden of sudden attention. "I owe you an apology," Harold began, his voice tinged with regret. "I didn't foresee the extent of the scrutiny or the disruption it would cause in your life." Jane gave a small, wry smile. I appreciate that, Harold. I know your intentions were good, but yes, it's a lot. I'm just a nurse who wanted to make a difference, not a headline. Harold nodded. I've watched you, Jane. Not just at the clinic, but how you interact with the community. Your compassion, your drive. It reminds me of why I started in philanthropy. I wanted to ensure that my legacy would continue to foster genuine change, not just be a name on a building. As they sat on a bench overlooking the river, Harold shared more about his own beginnings, his challenges, and his hopes for the future of his philanthropic work. It was a side of him few saw, one that resonated deeply with Jane's own values. I want you to know that I stand by my decision, despite the chaos it has caused, Harold said earnestly, and I will do whatever I can to support you through this. Jane listened, the enormity of Harold's trust in her becoming more real. She felt a mix of gratitude and responsibility. Thank you, Harold. I will do my best to honor your trust and continue the work that clearly means so much to you. The conversation marked a turning point in their relationship, forging a bond based on mutual respect and shared goals. It was a reassurance for Jane that her path, though unexpectedly public now, was supported by someone who truly understood the essence of service and philanthropy. Meanwhile, Harold's children, unwilling to let the matter rest, had intensified their efforts to discredit Jane's sudden inheritance. James, who taking the lead, met with a private investigator in a discreet downtown cafe. The investigator laid out a stack of photographs and reports on the table, the result of several days of tracking and background checks on Jane. Everything we've found about Jane Dawson is consistent with what she presents, the investigator reported. There's no hidden agenda, no sudden influx of wealth, no questionable relationships or transactions. Her financial records are clean, and her reputation in the community is solid. James frowned, his hopes of finding a loophole diminishing. Keep digging, he instructed, frustration evident in his voice. There has to be something. People don't just get lucky like this. As the investigation continued, with no incriminating evidence emerging, the focus shifted to those around Jane. The investigator began to look into her family, her past employment, and even her educational history, searching for any leverage that could be used. Back at her apartment, Jane received a call from Lisa, her colleague and close friend. There's a guy asking around about you at the clinic, Lisa warned. Seems like he's digging into your past. Jane's heart sank. The reality of being scrutinized was invasive and unsettling. She realized that the challenges ahead were not only about managing newfound wealth, but also defending her integrity against those determined to undermine her. Despite the turbulence, Harold's unwavering support provided a pillar of strength. He reassured her over a phone call. Don't worry, Jane. We'll handle this together. You're not alone in this. As the days turned into weeks, the intensity of public scrutiny did not wane, and Jane began to feel the weight of the world on her shoulders. The continuous media attention was not only a distraction from her work at the clinic, but also began to affect her relationships with patients and colleagues, who were now caught in the crossfire of the media circus. One evening, after a particularly grueling day, Jane sat in the small, sparsely decorated living room of her apartment, her thoughts in turmoil. She pondered over the decision that was becoming increasingly inevitable, renouncing the inheritance to reclaim her peace and protect her professional integrity. The phone rang, slicing through her thoughts. It was her mentor and former nursing school professor, Dr. Helen Bancroft. Jane, I've been following the stories. Doctor, Bancroft began, her voice both concerned and supportive. It's a tough situation you're in. Have you considered all your options? Jane sighed, the weight of her mentor's words heavy on her. I have, and I'm leaning towards declining Harold's gift. It might be the only way to stop all this chaos. Dr. Bancroft paused, then said softly, It's your decision, Jane. But remember why you became a nurse. Your commitment to helping others isn't defined by this controversy. Whatever you decide, make sure it's in line with your values and what you stand for. The conversation left Jane feeling slightly more grounded, reminded of her core motivations. She realized that any decision she made would need to not only address the immediate chaos, but also honor her lifelong commitment to serving others. The next day brought no relief from the relentless pressure. As Jane walked through the hospital corridors, her presence now turned heads, whispering following her like a shadow. Her resolve was tested further when she was suddenly summoned to a hastily arranged press conference outside the hospital. The media, hungry for a statement, surged forward as she stepped outside. Just as Jane approached the microphone, a loud voice cut through the chatter. "How does it feel to manipulate your way into an old man's fortune?" shouted a reporter, his question echoing off the hospital walls. Jane paused, her heart racing. This was the moment to clear the air. She took a deep breath and addressed the crowd, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "I entered nursing to make a difference in people's lives, not to seek fortune. The support I've received from Harold is overwhelming and unexpected. I respect him and his decision, but I am considering all options to ensure that this does not detract from my ability to serve my patients and the community." Her statement made headlines, showing her in a more sympathetic light. It also intensified the debate around Harold's decision, polarizing public opinion further. Back at Harold's estate, Harold watched the news coverage with a mix of pride and concern. He admired Jane's courage and integrity, but was pained by the toll it was taking on her. That evening, he called her, offering words of encouragement and reiterating his commitment to support her, no matter her decision. "Jane, you handled that well," Harold said warmly. "I'm here for you, and together we'll navigate through this storm." As the sun began to set, casting long shadows over the bustling streets of New York, Jane returned to her apartment, mentally exhausted but resolved to face whatever came next. Her phone buzzed incessantly with notifications, each one a reminder of the public spectacle her life had become. She tried to focus on the small acts of normalcy, like preparing a simple dinner, in an attempt to reclaim some semblance of her old life. Later that evening, as she sifted through her mail, a plain, unmarked envelope caught her attention. The heaviness of the paper felt ominous as she sliced it open. Inside was a single sheet, bearing a typed message that read, "Not everything is as it seems." Look closer at Harold's past. The message was unsigned, with no clue as to who sent it or why. The ambiguity of the note sent a shiver down Jane's spine. Was this a warning, a threat, or perhaps a clue meant to help her? The implications were unclear, but it was evident that someone wanted her to question Harold's motives, or perhaps uncover hidden aspects of his life. Puzzled and unnerved, Jane paced her small living room, the walls seeming to close in on her. She realized that this inheritance was more than just a financial windfall. It was a Pandora's box, opening up layers of complexity she hadn't anticipated. She decided she needed to talk to Harold directly, to confront the growing cloud of doubt and speculation that this note represented. The next morning, Jane visited Harold at his estate, the note burning a hole in her pocket. As they walked through the lush gardens, the air crisp with the scent of autumn, she handed him the mysterious message. Harold's reaction was carefully measured, his face betraying a momentary flicker of concern before regaining composure. "Jane, I assure you, my past, while not perfect, has nothing sinister that should concern you or anyone else," he said, his voice steady, but his eyes revealing a trace of old pain. "Harold, if we are to face this storm together, I need the complete truth," Jane insisted, her voice firm yet respectful. Harold sighed, a deep, weary sound. "Very well," he conceded. There are aspects of my life that I've kept private, not out of shame, but simply because they are personal. But you deserve to understand who you are aligning with." He gestured towards a bench, and they sat, the weight of impending revelations hanging between them. As Harold began to recount tales of his earlier years, filled with ambition, mistakes, and lessons learned, Jane listened intently, aware that the path she had chosen was now intertwined with Harold's more deeply than she had ever imagined. As they delved deeper into Harold's past, exploring the shadows and the light of his life story, Jane realized that understanding this complex man might be key to navigating the future she had inadvertently stepped into. The morning light filtered through the high windows of Harold's study, casting long shadows across the room, filled with books and memories. Harold and Jane sat across from each other, a sense of solemnity in the air, as Harold prepared to reveal more about his past, a past that might explain the mysterious warning Jane received. "Jane," Harold began, his voice tinged with the weight of years. "Many years ago, before I became the philanthropist you see today, my business practices weren't always what you might call ethical. I was a different man then, driven by profit, not purpose." Jane listened intently, her expression composed yet thoughtful as Harold continued. "I was involved in several aggressive corporate takeovers. It was legal but ruthless, and many people suffered as a result. It's this part of my life I've tried to atone for through my charitable work." Seeing the surprise and disappointment flicker across Jane's face, Harold paused, choosing his words carefully. "I understand if this changes how you see me. I hope to leave that part of my life in the shadows, not to deceive you, but to protect the good that has since been built." Jane processed the confession, the complexity of the man before her deepening in her eyes. "I appreciate your honesty, Harold. It doesn't change the good you've done, but it does show me the full picture. It's important for me to know both the shadows and the light." The revelation brought them to a new level of understanding, a mix of respect and caution coloring Jane's perception of Harold. As Harold's past came to light, so did the ramifications of his earlier business dealings. Within days of his confession to Jane, news broke that several of Harold's former business associates had come forward, reigniting old allegations of unethical practices. The media seized the story, adding to the scandal surrounding his recent changes to his will. Harold faced the possibility of legal action, and the implications for his current philanthropic interests were dire. His foundation could suffer, and by extension, the community and causes he supported. Harold summoned his legal team to prepare for what might come, their meetings long and fraught with tension. Jane watched Harold grapple with his past colliding with his present, her own role in his life more complicated than ever. She offered her support, staying by his side as they navigated the storm together. The strain was evident in Harold's demeanor, his usual composure tempered by bouts of worry. "I can handle what comes for me," he assured Jane one evening as they reviewed documents, "but I'm concerned about the foundation and everyone it supports. That's my legacy, not the mistakes I made decades ago." Jane nodded, her resolve strengthening. "Let's focus on ensuring the foundation endures, no matter what happens. Your legacy isn't just about what you built, it's about what you've changed and who you've helped." Together, they planned a public relations campaign to highlight the positive impacts of Harold's philanthropic efforts, hoping to counterbalance the negative press with reminders of the good he had achieved. In the midst of legal battles and media scrutiny, Harold and Jane found solace in their shared mission to protect the foundation's future. One afternoon, they visited one of the community centers funded by Harold's philanthropy, observing firsthand the positive impact of their work. Children laughed in the playgrounds, and adults attended classes meant to improve their lives. The visit was a poignant reminder of why they were fighting so hard. Seeing this, Jane said as they watched a group of children play, reaffirms why your legacy must continue. These are real lives being improved. Harold smiled, his eyes reflecting a mix of pride and determination. It's visits like this that remind me of my purpose. Despite the chaos, we must ensure this continues. His voice carried a renewed vigor, bolstered by Jane's support and the visible outcomes of his work. Determined to strengthen their case, Harold proposed an idea. We should document these stories, Jane. Let's show the public the human side of the Foundation's work. Jane agreed enthusiastically, and they began to plan a series of short documentaries featuring the stories of individuals and communities transformed by the Foundation. This project not only served to defend the Foundation's integrity, but also deepened the bond between Harold and Jane. Working closely together, they coordinated with filmmakers and community leaders, their partnership evolving into a dynamic force for good. As Harold and Jane worked to protect the Foundation, not all were in favor of their efforts. Unbeknownst to them, one of Harold's estranged relatives, cousin Richard, saw the turmoil as an opportunity to settle old scores and enhance his own standing within the family. Richard covertly met with a journalist, providing documents and information that painted Harold in an unflattering light. He spun tales of hidden agendas and misused funds, hoping to undermine Harold's credibility further and position himself as the rightful steward of the family's wealth. The article hit the newsstands with a splash, causing ripples across the community and among the Foundation's donors. "Finch's fortune, charity or chicanery," the headline blared, casting doubt on Harold's intentions and achievements. Harold was blindsided by the betrayal, his trust in family once again shattered. Jane, equally shocked, stood by him, her resolve hardening. "We won't let this go unanswered, Harold. Let's gather our evidence and tell our side of the story," she insisted. Together, they prepared for a counter-offensive, reaching out to longtime supporters and beneficiaries of the Foundation to speak out about their experiences. Their response was a carefully orchestrated article that featured testimonials and financial reports, showcasing the transparency and impact of Harold's philanthropy. This counter-article, titled "The True Legacy of Harold Finch's Philanthropy," was a decisive move to reclaim the narrative and restore faith in their work. Despite the betrayal, Harold and Jane remained united, their partnership proving to be a formidable force against the challenges they faced. As the public debate raged on, Harold and Jane intensified their efforts to collect evidence that could solidify their position and restore the community's trust in the Foundation. They spent days poring over financial documents, meeting minutes, and project reports, compiling a comprehensive dossier that outlined the Foundation's operations and impact. One morning, in Harold's home office, they spread out the collected documents on the large oak table, each paper a testament to years of diligent work and commitment. Jane, who had quickly become adept at navigating the maze of paperwork, pointed out several key projects that had dramatically improved community health and education. "Look at this," Jane said, highlighting a report on a recent health initiative. "This project alone has reduced emergency room visits by 40% in the area. It's a clear indicator of the Foundation's positive impact." Harold nodded, his expression a mix of pride and resolve. "We need to present this data at the next board meeting. It's crucial that the board sees the tangible benefits of our work, especially now." Together, they organized the evidence into a compelling presentation, planning to address both the board and the Foundation's major donors. Their goal was to reassure stakeholders of the Foundation's integrity and the careful management of its funds. The day of the board meeting arrived, and the atmosphere was tense. The boardroom was filled with Foundation members and key donors, all waiting to hear Harold and Jane's response to the recent allegations. The air was thick with anticipation and skepticism. Harold opened the meeting with a strong but measured tone. "Thank you all for coming," he began. "Recent events have brought our foundation's operations into question. Today, we're here to address these concerns and demonstrate the integrity of our work." Jane then took the lead, guiding the attendees through the presentation. She expertly detailed the financial allocations, showcased success stories, and highlighted the rigorous oversight that governed the foundation's operations. As the presentation concluded, a board member asked, "What about the allegations of misused funds?" It was a moment of tension that could undermine their efforts. Harold responded calmly, "We welcome scrutiny because we have nothing to hide. We've conducted an independent audit in response to these allegations, and I'd like to share those findings now." He then revealed the audit results, which confirmed the proper management of funds and debunked the accusations of financial misconduct. The report was a pivotal moment, turning the tide of opinion among the board members and donors. Relief and renewed confidence seemed to sweep through the room as the reality of Harold and Jane's commitment and transparency became undeniable. The meeting ended on a note of cautious optimism, with several board members and donors expressing their continued support for the foundation. This positive outcome marked a significant victory for Harold and Jane, reinforcing their bond and their resolve to protect and further the mission they believed in so deeply. In the wake of the board meeting, while relief permeated Harold's team, not all repercussions were positive. The media, ever eager for a scandal, shifted their focus slightly, suggesting that perhaps Harold had scapegoated someone else within his organization to protect his and Jane's interests. Speculation grew about whether a less influential, unnamed executive had been quietly pushed out or blamed for discrepancies that were never proven. Harold and Jane, aware of the new narrative, were determined not to let this false story gain traction. They convened with their PR team to strategize a response that emphasized the transparency and collective responsibility of their leadership, rather than pinpointing any one individual. "It's crucial that we communicate that the audit cleared not just me, but all our executives," Harold insisted during the meeting. "We succeed as a team, and we face challenges as one too." Jane supported this approach, helping to draft a statement that detailed the governance structure and shared accountability within the foundation. They decided to release this statement at an upcoming charity event, ensuring it reached a wide and relevant audience. As the charity event approached, the strain of the ongoing public scrutiny began to take a personal toll on Harold. His health, which had been robust despite his age, started to show signs of stress. Sleepless nights and constant worry manifested in fatigue and shortness of breath, symptoms he tried to dismiss, but which Jane noticed with growing concern. "Harold, you need to take care of yourself," Jane urged one afternoon as they prepared their speech for the event. "All this stress isn't good for anyone, especially not at your age." Harold waved off her concerns with a tired smile. "I can't rest, not while our work and my legacy are at stake. We need to see this through, Jane." At the charity event, as they presented their united front, Jane could see the toll the situation was taking on Harold. His speech was powerful, but delivered with a noticeable weariness. After the applause died down, several longtime supporters and friends approached, expressing not only their support, but also their concern for Harold's well-being. One old friend, Dr. Martin Weiss, a retired physician, pulled Jane aside. "He needs to slow down. If he won't listen to himself, maybe he'll listen to you. He respects you, Jane." Jane took this to heart, realizing that part of her role now was not just to defend the foundation, but also to look after its founder. That night, she made a decision to insist on medical checkups for Harold and to schedule more downtime into his calendar, hoping to ease the burden he carried. The charity event, although successful in reinforcing support for the foundation, left Harold visibly drained. As they returned to his estate, the quiet of the night contrasted sharply with the day's fervour. Harold's steps were slow, each one seeming to weigh heavily on him as he leaned slightly on Jane for support. Once inside, Harold insisted on discussing their next steps, despite Jane's protests that it could wait until morning. "We need to prepare for the annual financial review. It's going to be more scrutinized than ever this year," Harold explained, his voice rasping slightly. As they spread documents across the dining room table, Jane noticed Harold pause, his hand clutching his chest momentarily. Concerned, she immediately suggested calling his doctor, but Harold brushed it off. "It's just indigestion, nothing more," he insisted stubbornly. However, later that evening, as Jane was about to leave, Harold's condition worsened dramatically. He collapsed, struggling for breath, right in the middle of a sentence. Panic-stricken, Jane called for an ambulance, her training as a nurse kicking in as she administered first aid. As the paramedics took Harold away, his last, strained words to Jane were about the foundation. "Protect our work. Don't let it fall apart." The urgency in his voice made it clear how deeply he cared, not just for his own health, but for the legacy he hoped to leave behind. Jane stood in the ambulance's flashing lights, feeling the weight of Harold's trust. The episode ends with Harold's health in question, leaving the audience in suspense about his fate and the future of the foundation. In the following days, Harold's health became the central concern. The doctors diagnosed a severe heart condition, exacerbated by recent stresses. As Harold lay in the hospital, Jane took up the mantle more fully, coordinating with the foundation's staff to ensure operations continued smoothly despite Harold's absence. Meetings were filled with an underlying tension, as everyone was acutely aware of what Harold's potential inability to return meant for the foundation. Jane found herself in the unenviable position of reassuring staff, stakeholders, and the board that the foundation's mission would endure, no matter the outcome of Harold's health crisis. Simultaneously, she visited Harold daily, updating him on their progress and seeking his advice on critical decisions. During one such visit, Harold, though weakened, shared a poignant moment with Jane. "I've never regretted bringing you into this," he whispered, his voice thin but resolute. "You've got the vision and the heart for it. Remember, it's not about the money we spend, but the lives we touch." This conversation reaffirmed Jane's resolve to protect and advance the foundation's work, regardless of the personal and professional challenges it might entail. As she left the hospital that day, Jane felt an overwhelming sense of duty, not just to Harold, but to the cause they both cherished. As Harold's health fluctuated, the legal challenges against the foundation reached a critical point. With Harold incapacitated, Jane found herself at the forefront of a decisive courtroom battle. The allegations, spearheaded by a disgruntled former business partner of Harold's, claimed mismanagement of the foundation's assets. Jane, bolstered by a team of skilled lawyers and the thorough documentation she and Harold had prepared, was ready to defend their integrity. The courtroom was packed, the air thick with anticipation as Jane took the stand. She spoke with clarity and conviction, detailing the meticulous processes in place for financial oversight and the numerous audits conducted annually. Her testimony was supported by hard evidence and heartfelt statements from community members whose lives had been transformed by the foundation's work. As she spoke, the judge and jury seemed moved by the palpable impact of the foundation's work, evidenced not just in numbers, but in real human stories. Jane's ability to convey the foundation's mission and its careful stewardship of funds shifted the narrative from suspicion to recognition of the foundation's valuable community role. In the days following the courtroom victory, Jane and the foundation's leadership team convened to discuss strategic measures to safeguard the organization's future. It was clear that Harold's eventual inability to lead due to his health would require formal succession planning. Jane proposed several initiatives to strengthen the foundation's governance structures, including the establishment of an advisory board consisting of community leaders and experts in non-profit management. Harold E., though still recovering, participated in these meetings via video calls, his voice weak but his mind sharp. He expressed his full confidence in Jane's leadership and strategic vision. "Jane has shown a remarkable ability to steer our ship through stormy waters," he stated in a board meeting. "I believe it's time to formally recognize her role, not just as my successor, but as the visionary leader she has truly become." This endorsement from Harold was met with unanimous approval from the board, and plans were set in motion to begin the transition process. Jane, feeling both honored and overwhelmed by the responsibility, vowed to continue Harold's legacy with integrity and innovation. In the aftermath of the courtroom victory, Jane faced the reality of leading the foundation under her stewardship. The burden was heavy, and the sacrifices necessary were numerous. With Harold's health still precarious and his ability to engage consistently in day-to-day operations diminishing, Jane stepped up to make crucial decisions that would secure the foundation's future. Recognizing the need for a solid financial base to continue the foundation's initiatives, Jane made the tough decision to streamline operations. This meant cutting back on some projects that, while valuable, were not sustainable given the current financial scrutiny. Each decision was painstaking, as she knew each cut had real-world implications for the people they served. Jane worked tirelessly, often late into the night, poring over budgets and project reports, seeking ways to do more with less. Her home life suffered, her personal relationships strained under the weight of her responsibilities, but the thought of letting Harold down or failing the communities they served pushed her forward. The strain of her new responsibilities began to take a toll on Jane's health and morale. One evening, as she sat alone in her office, the weight of the world seemingly on her shoulders, she received a call from the hospital. Harold had taken a turn for the worse, and the doctors were not optimistic about his chances of recovery. Rushing to the hospital, Jane found Harold weak but lucid, and they shared a moment of quiet understanding. "You've been my greatest project, Jane," Harold whispered, his voice barely audible. "I know I've asked too much of you, but I've never doubted your ability to carry on this work." Tears streamed down Jane's face as she held Harold's hand. "I don't know if I can do this without you," she confessed, the fear of losing her mentor and friend making her voice tremble. Harold squeezed her hand gently. "You're stronger than you know, and you won't be doing it alone. I've made sure of that." This conversation, possibly their last, was a poignant reminder of the personal cost of their work, the sacrifices made not just in time or money, but in the emotional toll it exacted on those who dared to make a difference. After the emotional visit with Harold, Jane returned to the foundation with a renewed sense of purpose. She realized that overcoming her doubts and the organization's challenges would be her true test of leadership. With Harold's health fading, Jane organized a series of community outreach sessions to reinforce the foundation's commitment and transparency. These events also served to galvanize support and volunteer efforts, showcasing the tangible benefits of the foundation's work. At one such event, Jane met with community leaders and volunteers, her speech imbued with personal anecdotes and a clear vision for the future. "And we are here not just to serve, but to empower," Jane declared, her voice resonant with conviction. "Our mission extends beyond aid. It's about building a sustainable community that thrives through its challenges." The response was overwhelmingly positive, with many attendees expressing their appreciation for the Foundation's efforts and committing to long-term support. Jane's ability to connect with the community, demonstrating both vulnerability and strength, helped restore faith in the Foundation's mission. As the season changed and the first signs of spring appeared, the Foundation had stabilized, and the community's support was stronger than ever. Jane had successfully steered the organization through one of its toughest periods, proving herself a worthy successor to Harold's legacy. Meanwhile, Harold's condition stabilized, but it was clear he would not return to his former role. In a poignant board meeting, attended by Harold via video, Jane was officially appointed as the new CEO of the foundation. Harold Rail, looking frail but proud, passed on his heartfelt congratulations. "Jane, under your leadership, I have no doubt that the best days of our foundation lie ahead," he said, a sentiment echoed by applause from all present. Jane's journey from a dedicated nurse to the leader of a significant philanthropic foundation was marked by trials and triumphs. In her final speech as the newly appointed CEO, she reflected on the lessons learned and the path ahead. "Our work has always been about more than just money or programs," she noted. "It's about the hearts we touch and the lives we change. And as we look to the future, I'm committed to continuing this legacy with integrity, passion, and an unwavering focus on our community." If you enjoyed, please consider subscribing to our channel and supporting us through the thanks button.